This is not a normal pot. This is the famous Advaita Vedanta pot, which stars in the clay and pot story in almost every teaching example. And today we will see the 5 critical takeaways from this demonstration. First, the definition of Satya and Mithya. Now, the truth of this pot is clay. The essence of this pot is clay. Whether you call it a pot or a pan or a bottle, these are simply names and forms, impermanent names and forms on that one continuous reality of clay. It is crucial that you understand this definition of truth or Satya carefully. Absolute truth is that which has its own independent existence. That is, if there was a time when such a thing did not exist, then there will also be a time when such a thing would cease to exist. And anything that comes into existence and goes out of it cannot be called absolute reality. In the universe of clay and clay pots, pans and bottles, the absolute reality is clay. Its existence is not dependent on the form it takes. In fact, it is clay before it takes any form and will remain clay in any shape or form. The pot, on the other hand, is completely dependent on clay for its existence. Now, if something with independent existence is called Satya, then a thing which has a borrowed temporary existence can be called Mithya. So that definition is all nice and fine, but what do I learn from this clay and clay pot story? Well, Advaita Vedanta says that this body-mind complex which you have come to believe as I is simply a name and form on that one continuous absolute reality of Brahman, existence, consciousness, bliss. This non-dual consciousness is that from which every object borrows its temporary existence. The clay of your existence is Brahman, and the pot is your body, mind, thoughts, ego, and every other form which you take as you move about the world. Now, of course, the clay pot is only an analogy, but it does go pretty far in letting us see the difference between truth, the absolute truth, and the transactional reality. Takeaway number 2, impermanence. In the clay universe, this pot can be broken, painted, crushed, remade, and reused. It changes and it will change. And no matter how secure you keep it in the world's strongest vault, one day it will cease to exist. Impermanence is inherent in its temporary existence. But clay, it always was clay. Even when it lent the pot its existence, it never changed. And even when the pot will break, the clay would simply remain just as it was. This body will change and it will die, and if this is the only reality that you can hold on to as I, then you are bound to suffer, both in the attempt to hold on to it and in the eventual failure when you wouldn't be able to. Yet the moment you realize that the real self, Brahman, is changeless, all of these worries start taking a much more impersonal perspective. They become almost like a movie to be observed. It still goes on, but you're not really that concerned. Takeaway number 3, all pervasiveness. Now, is there any part of this pot which is not clay? No, it's clay through and through. Similarly, existence consciousness is the very essence of what we call the world. It lends the isness to every object. Everything that exists borrows its existence from this one absolute reality. Now, understanding this concept is in fact very crucial to understanding the Advaita, the non-dual part of Vedanta. At this recognition, there is simply no scope of there being a second. Consciousness is all pervasive, it is everywhere. In fact, even if you reach the pinnacle of your spiritual journey, the stuff which you call Mithya is precisely where you will find Satyam as well. Takeaway number 4, truth is free from qualifications and attributes. Now, as a pot, this has a definite form, competing on the shopkeeper's shelf for attention, afraid of being broken or shy of being ignored. Its name and form are what define it. But as clay, it just is without external or internal differences. And before you get confused into technicalities such as the porosity or texture or density of clay, remember this is all just an analogy to point you towards something which cannot be expressed in words. In this example, clay is free from qualifications. It is always as it is, just like consciousness. The entire world appears and disappears in that awareness. Objects, both internal and external, are illumined by that one consciousness, but it remains unaffected and always free from attributes. Number 5, avidya or misidentification. And finally, you might be thinking, call it clay, call it a clay pot, call it a pot. What difference does it make to my reality? Remember, this analogy, this demonstration is meant to point you towards the real teaching, which is that you, the real you, is like the changeless clay, but you have identified yourself with this changing mind-body complex. You are now not only lost in ignorance, but also doomed to suffer the limitations of the pot. Your body, just like the pot, will get scratched, burnt, destroyed, change, and eventually cease to exist. Consequently, you also feel that you're always in danger of getting destroyed or losing a race against other such pots. You feel a sense of lack, of being unfulfilled, of being dissatisfied, even after achieving all that you set out to. Now, there are plenty of short-term remedies against this suffering, but only one teaching which will eradicate it by its root. And that is, you have to know, truly know who you really are and let go of this identification with something which is impermanent. And spoiler alert, just like the clay in the clay pot story, you are the unbroken, untainted consciousness. The takeaways here emphasize the core teachings of Advaita Vedanta, the non-dual nature of reality, the illusory impermanence of the world, and the importance of knowing yourself as consciousness. But in order to have any impact, all of this needs to become a living reality, not just remain a theoretical exercise. Good luck in that journey.